Hello, everybody. This is Sue Frederick and Katie Kuntz, and we are having a live book discussion about my newest book, Through a Divine Lens. So let me introduce Katie. Katie is the executive editor. Is that the correct term, Katie?
The editor-in-chief.
The editor-in-chief, sorry, of Unity Magazine. And she's been published and been a writer for how many years, Katie? Published writer?
Count, but probably more than I want to admit, probably 35 or 40.
35, 40 years. Woohoo. Any writer is a soul sister to me because I'm a writer also. In fact, Katie and I traveled many parallel journeys in our journalism careers and our writing. And it's such a gift to be her friend. I completely fell in love with her when I met her through Unity Magazine. And so we've just become great friends ever since. So Katie is doing me the honor of interviewing me about this new book, Through a Divine Lens. So take it away, Katie.
Well, before the first question, I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love the book. And the cover is gorgeous. Can people see it? There we go.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous.
That's really
I love that. It just really draws you in.
Well, Inner Traditions is the publisher, and they came up with that and sent it to me, and I was like, wow, that is like the best book cover I've ever seen.
I know. I just kind of want to go into that vortex.
Yeah.
But speaking of vortexes, you start this book with talking about an out-of-body vision that you had, and what was it, 2015, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And you had that during an illness.
Mm-hmm.
And in the vision, your guides told you about what was going to be happening, upcoming events on Earth, and things might appear chaotic and horrible, but not to worry, that the light was still present and the light was going to win out, which is so comforting to hear, because
Well, it is to me. It is to me too. I mean, at the time I had the vision, life was fairly comfortable. It was before COVID, before a lot of political upheaval. And I remember getting this vision where, if you can see behind me, the guides were holding me up in space and showing me planet Earth and showing me all these rays of light coming off of the planet. And they were saying each ray of light is a soul waking up to love, compassion, higher consciousness. And as you see, each light that is sparks another light. And they were showing me how all around the globe, one light was sparking another. And they kept saying, and you see, the light is always winning. The light overcomes the darkness, and love is always winning. And they were just urgently telling me, so that means when you go back, no matter what happens, you have to be teaching people that no matter how it looks in the day-to-day of the next few years, the light and the love is still winning. And I remember when I woke up, I was thinking, what does that mean? Things are kind of okay at this point in humanity. And boy, did we find out what that means, right?
Yeah, we did.
So holding on to that vision of the divine, and that's what came through about the vision, is that there's two ways we view life. And one way is this way, seeing the divinity in everything, seeing God in everything and everyone, God the good, versus what the human mind or the ego mind wants us to think, that it's all tragic and terrible and falling apart. And it's so easy to slip into that viewpoint. I would say I have to shift myself out of it about 100 times a day.
So that makes sense. It's something to be conscious of, but it's not. We shouldn't beat ourselves up if we slip back into worry, fear, doubt, all that kind of stuff. The important thing is to get back on track, right?
And the thing is, we can't be human without experiencing those emotions of fear and doubt. That's all part of the human journey. It's kind of what we come to push against and learn from. And I always tell people if we were enlightened down here 24/7, then there wouldn't be a need to come to Earth and incarnate here. We would just all hang out in the divine realms. But we're trying to push consciousness into this earthly, beautiful realm here. And sometimes, we forget that and we think this realm is all there is. And that's when we get lost. That's when all the trouble happens.
So that's what inspired you to write the book, to explain what this means and how we can look through this
Yeah.
divine lens, and all the things that that can do for us, and how that can help us here and change our perspective. So, and you say that we all have this flawless intuition, this great guidance system. Even those of us who say, "Oh no, I'm not intuitive. Oh, I don't have that." We all have this, right?
We
So,
all have
but
it.
we have to trust it, even when it seems like, that doesn't make sense. Can you talk about
Well,
that a little
yeah,
bit? That's hard for
because
people, I think.
I know it's hard for everybody. We all have a left brain, a logic mind, and we all have a right brain, which is our intuitive, creative, all-knowing connection to source. And when we come to Earth as children, we're much more into our right brains because children are creative and free and imaginative and all that good right brain stuff. And I also believe that children are very intuitive. I had many intuitive experiences as a child, but then the world steps in, well-meaning parents, well-meaning teachers and schools, and they say, no, you have to be logical. You have to develop the left brain part of yourself in order to survive here. And so we learn to read and write and all those good things in school that develop our left brain. And what happens is, as we go through that growing up, basically you're being taught to shut down your intuition, to shut down your right brain self, to not trust it. And so then you hit something in your life like grief and loss, or suddenly being unhappy with your career and really wanting to make a different choice with your life. And your intuition is now this tiny little voice that you've been ignoring for decades. And so you have to learn to meditate and quiet that logic mind so that you can hear it and trust it. But even then, I was just now working with a client who is grieving the loss of her husband, and she was desperately wanting to trust that when she would hear something that sounded like him, that it was really him. And so she would hear it and then go, is that really you? Are you really there? And I was just joking with her going, imagine how frustrated he is. He's your departed loved one and he's going, I love you. And he was saying all these wise things to her, and she was actually hearing them and then instantly doubting if they were real, because the left brain mind would come in. And I always tell people our departed are like hanging out in the divine realms going, oh my God, those people drive me crazy down there. They don't listen to anything we say.
I bet they are.
That's right. This is the 43rd week, the week of the 43rd anniversary of my husband Paul's crossing. I have been through phases in that journey of grief, of believing, oh, Paul's moved on. He can't be communicating with me. I have to move on. This is what the normal grief world will tell you. And then finally coming back full circle to, no, time and space is not linear, not logical. A soul can move on and reincarnate and also come back and be loving and guiding you every day for the rest of your life. And so putting your logic mind out of that equation, Paul gave me the most beautiful sign this weekend. He did, after 43 years, and he's given me tons of signs and messages. But this weekend, I was having a hard time because I've just been feeling super sensitive. And there's many planetary reasons for that and cosmic reasons, as well as just personally feeling, I guess I'd say that July in Arizona is the hardest month to be happy in. It's 114 all week here. But other than that, so I was really going through a little slump, and And okay, so Gene, my beautiful husband, we were just hanging out in this town that we love called Cave Creek, where they have all these artist galleries and incredible Native American art and Mexican imported art. And it was just, we were having so much fun. And we walked right into a store. Right in the door was this huge symbol of the crescent moon with the planet or the star right in the middle of it. And when Paul and I fell in love in the 70s, the first immediate gift he gave me was a necklace with that symbol. And he said, you're the moon and I'm the star, and we fit together like this. And then on the night that he crossed, or when we had the service in Colorado 43 years ago, we were sitting outdoors and doing the service, and my friend nudged me and said, look up, it's Paul's symbol. And I looked in the sky, and that exact crescent moon, planet Jupiter in the middle, was right above us during the service. I just couldn't believe it. It was such a sign. So this weekend, Paul delivered that as if to say, pep up, what's wrong with you? I'm still around. Everything's fine, you know? And it was huge. It was this big piece of metal sculpture. And so we bought it and brought it home and hung it in the family room. It's huge and gorgeous. And it's even gold. It catches the light. It's just magnificent. And there is no doubt in my heart that that's Paul saying, pep up, girl. You got it all going on. Get over yourself. I'm okay. You're okay.
So it means we have to pay attention and we have to be open, right?
I mean, I could have easily just walked by it and gone, that's a coincidence. And that's our choice. That's free will. And that's the beauty of this life. You can decide every minute, is that a sign? Is that something from the divine giving me a positive message? Or is it just a coincidence? And I always tell people, if you believe in coincidence, then every good thing that happens to you will be a coincidence in your mind. If you believe in God and everything, everywhere, all the time, then everything is a sign from the divine. And that's the divine lens view. That's the happy view. And even if you're just saying, well, I'm just going to choose to look at things that way, and I don't even know for sure if it's true, that's a healthy choice, because the other alternative is this is a random, meaningless, tragic universe. And like my client today, she and her husband had all these plans and this great life ahead of them. And he got colon cancer, just like my Paul did 43 years ago. And he suffered terribly. And she is vacillating constantly now between, she said, my life is in ashes, my life is destroyed, versus maybe there's something for me to learn and grow in this, and that someday I'll look back at it as a moment of great teaching, and someday I'll remember and realize that my departed is still with me. And she gets to choose when and how she'll believe that or step into that. And that's the grief journey. We go back and forth between those two, and we have to, but eventually we lean more into that divine view of it. And that's how we begin to have a productive, meaningful life after great loss.
So let me ask, I think most of us know when we're absolutely in our ego lens and not in the divine lens, you know, when we're frustrated and we're cursing and we're angry and we're yelling and blah. And I think most of us know when we're absolutely looking at it through the divine lens, like what you just described.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's this middle ground. And I think sometimes it can be tricky because you can think that you're looking through the divine lens and then realize, oh, wait, no, because I've got these assumptions. So can you talk about how we can tell when it's in that kind of difficult middle ground?
You know, that's such a good question, because there's a place of being numb. I call it kind of flatlining, that humans learn to find that middle ground place where they're not feeling anything, basically, and they're just going about their day kind of numbed out. But what that really means is that their heart is closed. Because when our heart is open, we are feeling love and joy. And even if we're doing our laundry, we're singing a little song, and we're thinking, oh, I'm grateful for this, or gee, I'm going to call my friend so-and-so and plan a get together. All of that is heart opened expression. And it takes energy to open your heart and be feeling things like that during the day. And when we're exhausted, we do tend to just kind of shut it down and go into survival mode. But the thing about life is sooner or later, you're going to bump into something that is going to bother you. And by your reaction, then you're going to know which lens you're looking at. I mean, it can be as little as you're doing laundry and suddenly you run out of laundry soap. So does that make you really angry and frustrated? Or do you go, oh, well, good, I needed to go to the store for all these other things, so I'm going to take a break and go buy some laundry soap? There are always two ways to look at every moment. And one of them has God and love and light in it and an open heart. And the other has drudgery and tedium and pointlessness and all that stuff that humans love to get bogged down into, including me.
Yeah, we all do. That's why we're human, though.
That's right.
So when we find ourselves in those negative emotions, or and maybe we don't want to put a value judgment on them, but ego emotions, let me put it that way. The remedy, as you see it, is to lift up into the soul's view. I mean, that's how you recognize that you're doing it, and then lift up into the soul's view for this higher understanding and higher perspective. So how do we do that? How does the everyday person who's paying bills and going to work,
I know.
And,
well, there's
how
a
do
lot
you remember
well,
to do that?
fortunately, there's a lot of different ways, and a lot of them are so easy. And in Unity, we talk a lot about gratitude. So Katie, you and I know that gratitude is the super simple way of shifting that. So for example, I can just sit here and think of 3 things I'm grateful for at this moment, even my cat in the next room, even the fact that when I'm done, I get to go have dinner with Jean, and just the little things in life that we can be grateful for. They begin shifting us into that divine lens. But the thing for me that works so powerfully is I literally close my eyes, take a deep breath. I was doing this just today because I was exhausted. I had a lot of commitments today, and I was thinking, gosh, can I get through the day? So I just took a breath, and I even just lift my head up and say, please, divine guides, angel beings, departed loved ones, lift me up out of my drudgery, my exhaustion. Show me the beauty and the divine order of this moment. Lift me into the grace and love of my divine essence. Those simple little prayers like that. The universe loves a request like that. That request is answered immediately. And what I noticed when I asked for that, it was right before I did my most recent client today. And I was thinking, gosh, do I have the energy? I was telling Katie earlier that I had a 5 a.m. podcast interview this morning. And that's hard for me to be camera ready, coffee intake already done by 5 o'clock, cats fed, but I did it. And so right around 3 o'clock, I was really dragging. So I made that little request right before I did my client. And the client just was extraordinary. We had the most extraordinary session, and it all lifted me up. And that request of lift me up came through in that work with the client. So whenever we request, it will come through to us one way or the other.
So I also want to talk a little bit about a topic that's getting a lot of attention these days in terms of your book and your advice. How do we make sure when we are doing that, when we are switching to the divine lens, and we're in a lot of pain, and we're going through a lot of muck, and we're like, okay, we got to switch to this. How do we make sure that we're not just being a Pollyanna, that we're not just spiritual bypassing?
Right. That's a great term that people love. First of all, let me tell you, I don't think it's possible to be human and to spiritually bypass. If you haven't felt pain in your life, or if you don't have any pain and suffering, especially at this time in the world's evolution, then I think maybe you're artificial intelligence being, but you're not human because this world is rocking our boat right now. And
Mhm.
whether we're worried about politics or the environment or finances or whatever, there is so much happening now that I think it's absolutely impossible to not be feeling some kind of thing as we move through it. And I always say, or many people say, you have to feel it to heal it. So even if you're angry about something in the world, or if you're grieving, you got to cry that out. You got to have those emotions. But the minute you come up for air and you go, okay, now, I feel better. I had a really good cry, or I really hit bottom with my upsetness about the world. Now will you lift me back up into my higher self, my awareness, my wisdom? Because it's not like you don't ever feel that if you're looking into your divine lens. If we could live in that divine lens perspective 24/7, we'd be done with this life. We'd be out of here. We'd graduate, but nobody can. So the people who talk about spiritual bypassing, I mean, I don't think they really believe that somebody can go through grief and not be crying their eyes out at least once every couple days, and then finding a way to lift themselves out of it. And I even teach a meditation called Break Your Heart Wide Open. It's in the book, where you wake up first thing in the morning at sunrise when the energy is really perfectly crystalline for being able to feel this pain. You wake up at sunrise, put your hand in front of your heart chakra, and make that request. Please, divine guides, help me to feel this pain of grief and pour it out of my heart chakra and cry with it, experience it, sit with it. And usually when I'm in raw grief of some kind, I'll really cry at that point, and then picture it coming out of my heart chakra into the palm of my hand, and then lifting my palm up and saying, please transform this pain into love, and then repeating the process. And if you could do that every morning when you're in grief, then the rest of the day, you're not fighting off that sadness all day that is so prominent in grief. And instead, you can lift into that view of God. But I'm a big proponent of tears. I cry all the time, Katie, and you're my friend. You know that's true. I'm such a little Pisces baby crying all the time. And I used to beat myself up for it. And now I go, hey, I cry all the time, and I laugh all the time, and I have joy. I would rather feel all of it than just try to. I wish I could spiritual bypass. I mean, I never can do that, and I know some people can, so maybe they could teach us. I'm just kidding.
You're gonna get emails.
I know. I know. And the fact that Paul's anniversary of his death is coming up, and it's 43 years, and I'm feeling it. And I tell all my grieving friends and clients, we honor that week of the anniversary of their departure, because it marks a pain in the psychic system, in the body, that never goes away. And as long as we honor it when it comes up, and know that it's not the end of the world, and that it's okay to cry and feel it, and then when we can lift up and feel better, that's the perfect expression of grief. I'll be crying tomorrow, or no, Thursday, the day of his anniversary. I'm quite sure that at some point I'm not crying because I wish he was here. I'm crying from the memory of trauma, of grief, and how I know it affects so many people in the world. And I'll have a few tears over that.
Oops, you went away. Sorry.
Am I here?
Or maybe I went away. One of us went away.
Oh, that's so interesting. I wonder what spirit is doing, taking us. We're done with our lifetime. We're getting lifted up.
So you were saying you're not crying because
because I wish Paul were here. I mean, I know he's good in the divine and I have a great life here. I'm crying just for the crack in the world that we feel when we experience grief and the longing to be in the divine realms. And anyone who's been through great grief knows that most of the time what you're crying for is you want to graduate and go into the divine realms and be with them, especially if it's your child who's departed. That's what my mom friends who've lost children, their sadness is, why can't I go be with my child? And then they come to a different way of viewing it because they talk to their child and hear from their child, and the child says, Mom, get over yourself. You're still there for a reason. Get to work. And so then they want to make their child proud of them. But the tears come when they just wish they were done with this life and in the unconditional love of the higher realms. Don't we all?
Yes. So you also teach how we can grow through these difficult experiences and use these difficult emotions like grief or anger or maybe even just something as garden variety as frustration. How can we actually use that?
Yeah.
To instead of just circumventing it or
Yeah.
going, above it, or
Well,
how can
I
we actually
believe that
use that?
I think pain is our greatest fuel here for not only spiritual awakening, but for using our pain as our true work, to guide us to our true work and make a difference in the world. So the way I say it in my books is our greatest work offers to the world what we wish had been offered to us in our moment of greatest pain. So even if I go back to when Paul died of cancer and everyone was telling me, don't reach out to him. He may have moved on, or you have to get on with your life right now. And they were not saying to me, hey, let's examine what your soul agreement with Paul is and why you're still here and what your great work is, because that would have really helped me. And now, wow, lo and behold, that's what my work is all about. It's about helping people realize if they're still here, it's because they did agree to stay and do some work to help the world, to help other people. Our meaningful life has to involve helping other people. It doesn't mean it has to be being a doctor or nurse. It can be an editor and a writer like you, like me. My first career after Paul crossed is I was a health writer, and I wrote about preventing disease, of course, because I was trying to keep people from getting sick and suffering and dying the way Paul had. And so that's the link that we can look for in our meaningful work.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about sacred numerology. I mean, I know you and I have talked before about your fantastic workbook, all about that, and you talk about that a lot in Through a Divine Lens. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is and why it's sacred numerology and how that works?
It's such a good question because in all these podcast interviews, people are asking me, like, why do you call it sacred numerology? And my first reaction is, wow, people don't think it's sacred. And then I've started to learn, no, they don't. A lot of people think, and even very famous, in fact, I would say the most famous numerologist who's got all these best-selling books out, she believes that we are just these random beings floating through the universe, and the day we're born puts a vibrational imprint on our being that we have to follow for the rest of our lifetime. Like we're sort of victims to the date and time we were born. And I see it completely reversed. I say that, Katie, we were all hanging out in the divine realms, even you and me. And we said, boy, we've got to go back in. And we have to go back in because I personally wanted to develop my inner strength, my outer strength, and I wanted to be able to bring some important words to uplift the world. And you had your words you wanted to bring to the world and the things you wanted to do here. And so we agreed to a certain path of learning, and we picked a numerology birth path according to the vibration that it would bring us every lesson we wanted and needed and allow us to express every gift all explained in that numerology birth path. And so we jump in. And that puts the soul in charge. The soul is always in charge. The soul is the one who writes your cesarean birth date in the doctor's calendar. When the doctor is scheduling your cesarean, the soul of that child is writing that. So the soul chooses the moment of entry and the moment of exit. And that's controversial, I know, but the soul decides when the lifetime is complete and that all lessons have been learned and accomplished, even if that's very early on. We can't judge it from our human mind. We don't understand it from our human mind. But from the divine realms, you can see that some very highly evolved souls only stay a little while here. They don't have to stay longer. And that includes children. And that's a hard thing for people to accept, that it's not just a random tragedy. So I ask them to just sort of be inquisitive about it, to question it, to look into different understandings of the life plan, the birth path mission, and say, is it possible that I planned this life, not my human mind, but my soul planned it for highest good for myself and others? And even just asking that question will put you on a path to find a different kind of answer.
That makes sense. So we can tap into that and kind of use it as a tool to understand why things happen the way they do.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we can spend less time ruminating about it. Why is this happening?
Right.
Get on with it, right?
You know, the worst thing about life here is when people have really struggled, if they we all go to victim mode, at times, but if you stay in that, gee, the world has been unfair to me, I've had more pain than anybody else, I'm blaming so and so for all of it, that is definitely the ego lens view. And it's definitely not true. And the great joke is, wow, your soul wanted you to break that pattern of anger and blame and victimhood. And here you are really immersing yourself in it, but you'll get some more chances to wake up, to break that pattern before the life is over. And I always say the people most enlightened get to leave first. And here I am in my 70s, so that tells you a lot.
Well, I'm keeping you company, so. One of the things I found so fascinating when you were talking about numerology that I did not learn before was that Pythagoras, everybody talks about Pythagoras, not as a mystic, but as, a philosopher and a mathematician, and he did all this wonderful stuff. He was really into sacred numerology, right?
He started it. He created our number system. He said that every number has a mystical meaning as well as a quantity and a practical meaning. And he started a school for enlightenment and taught mystical. I bet Pythagoras loves that I call it sacred numerology. Thank you, Pythagoras. And it's so funny the way our culture is so left brain dominated that just got drilled right out of it. We all went through school, we learned about Pythagoras, and none of us learned that he started numerology and believed in the sacred meaning of numbers. That would make the school world explode.
Yeah, my math teacher did not quite get into that, or maybe I was that day. But it's a really great example of how, the value of right and left brain, intuition and sacred things, and also logic, which, as a human being, we need to contend with. They're both valuable. We need both.
And as you say that, Katie, it just makes me realize why I love numerology so much, because, for example, my process of preparing for a client, first I sit down and do math. I get to sit down and do the birth date and calculate this and calculate where they are in their personal years. And I even calculate all their 9-year cycles. And it's very logical, very comforting. And then I put my hand on it and shift into my right brain and call in guidance and intuition and connection to the spirit guide and the departed. And so then I'm totally in my right brain as I download that guidance. And then when I'm doing the session, I get to dance in the left brain of the numbers and the right brain of the intuitive part of it. And so numerology to me is a perfect art, and it does involve both the left brain and the right brain. And I think that's why I love it so much.
You talked about your personal year number. What are some of the other things that you look at when you're doing the numbers before a reading? What else is
Well, the
important?
personal year charts, I mean, and I just have to hold up my sacred numerology workbook again.
Another great cover, by the way.
You can get it on Amazon. But I mapped out, I put in the back of that all the 9-year cycle charts. So anyone can go and say, oh, I'm on the 4 birth paths. So this is my chart. And then you write your year of birth beside the first number, and you just carry your years of your life through. And then you get a bird's eye view. It's actually like a soul review of your lifetime, where you just get to go and say, oh, I hit that 9-year, that ending of a cycle when I was 6 years old. Gee, that's when we moved, and that's when things really changed at home, and kind of the end of innocence of my childhood. And then you follow all of those reinvention points, and at the end you go, wow, I always thought it was some random tragedy, or I had done something wrong to cause the end of a relationship or a career. And yet you see it now, it's all mapped out. And so it reinforces the idea that this is a life plan that your soul put into place before you even came here. And the personal year cycles help people so much. In fact, if somebody's cynical about numerology, and when I'm teaching numerology classes, they might be cynical through the birth path discussion, they might be cynical through this or that, and then when we hit those personal year cycles, everyone becomes a believer. And I love sitting on the floor. Everyone has their workbook open, and they're all mapping out their charts, and they're going, oh, this happened to me when I hit mine, what happened to you? And they're having these conversations. And it takes all of the doubt, the blame, the guilt out of our stories. Suddenly, we're just experiencing reinvention points because they are required for growth. And how did we move through those reinvention points is the only important question to ask. And when we cross over at the end and we look at our soul review, those of us who do numerology will be saying, do I get an A+? Because I've been doing this at home on my chart for a long time, so I kind of know where I messed up, and I've tried to do better. So am I going to pass,
I'm sure you will.
No, I don't
I
know.
love that idea
They'll
that
say, Sue, boy, you sure got grumpy when you ran out of laundry soap. And for my husband, Gene, we always joke that they're going to say, Gene, you were just a magnificent, loving, generous soul until you were in traffic. And then you lost all of your consciousness. Go back and do it again.
No, anything but that.
I know, he'll say anything but that. Yeah, you have to go back and be a taxi driver in New York City.
Well, that's enough to make me live straight right there. I love how all of this work, the numerology and the whole learning to look through a divine lens, also really does a number on self-judgment. So many of us, especially women, but also men too, we just judge ourselves harshly all the time. And this really helps us stop that. Can you talk about that?
Yes, it is so important for that. Once you understand the nature of your path, what you came to be and experience and learn, so for example, for me, I'm on a 22-4, which means I'm always going to have a lot of work on my plate. And no, it's not something I've done wrong or something I need to learn how to get over, because I came to accomplish a lot. It's part of my mission. So it helps me accept the fact about myself that while other people are out having vacations, I've got another book coming out, which I'm very grateful for, and lots of interviews for it, but I'm always cranking out the work. And it took me many decades to realize That's okay. That is what I came to do in this life, and I have to surrender to that. Whereas somebody else would be on a path where they get to travel and write about it, Katie, and be on the 5 path, having these great adventures. And maybe sometimes you beat yourself up and say, you know, why can't I just settle down and have a conventional life? And that's just not what you agreed to this lifetime, you
Yep.
know? And the other thing it helps with is to understand that we've all walked different journeys. So maybe in this lifetime, I'm on the 4 because I'd never worked hard before. I had played and goofed off in many lifetimes. I can totally believe that. And then this one, I decided to work on my strength and my ability to achieve things. And boy, that's what I'm doing. And so when we look at it in the big soul arc of how many lifetimes have we been developing our soul's wisdom, we have many things to learn in those journeys, many different arcs of learning we're trying to accomplish. So whatever's in front of you right now, that's what your soul needed to have in front of you for this moment of your evolution.
Mm. You know, we've been talking a lot about coming back, you know, the next life, the last life. Reincarnation is one of those hot topics. Some people are really into it. Some people think it's, you know, a little crazy. Do you think we all reincarnate?
Well, here's what I've learned in a lot of studies is that a soul chooses to come to Earth, but there are certain souls who have spent most of their time in the angelic realms and very few lifetimes in the human realms. And then there are many souls who only come to Earth and come to Earth quite often, and they play important roles here. And then get ready for this. There are interplanetary souls who come from other galaxies who come to Earth to incarnate here to help the evolution of Earth. And so it's a very complex interplay. And the other thing I'll say is that reincarnation is not a punishment story. And it's so funny the way man wants to create like a Bible heaven and hell judgment story and turn reincarnation into that. Even the Buddhists go wrong with that. You know, they'll say, oh, if you have a bad thought in this lifetime and you hate someone or you're angry, then you've got to come back in another life. And they paint this endless cycle of reincarnation. That's not an all good, all God universe. Instead, it's our own soul getting to the divine realms, studying, deciding what humanity needs, deciding if we can play a part in that, and deciding if, gee, if I go back during this really difficult time in human evolution, will I develop my ability to have compassion? Because I want to grow that in my soul. I want to be more compassionate. So I'll go jump in during this difficult time. That's how it is. So you can't just go, oh, it's a constant cycle of reincarnation. I lived in Boulder, Colorado for 40 years, which is a heavily Buddhist town. So I'm well versed in Buddhist dogma. And those Eastern traditions can be as dogmatic as the Christian traditions. And this brings me to unity. The reason I love unity and that I'm a unity minister is their core principle is that it's an all good, all God universe, and that God is inside of all of us. There is nothing more beautiful and profound than that principle, and that is the core of unity.
No, that is, I feel the same way. And I'll say that even if people are a little hung up and not really sure what they think about reincarnation, and they still think it's kind of maybe crazy, maybe definitely crazy, that does not mean that they can't get a lot out of this book and still learning about the ego lens and the divine
Right.
lens. So
Right.
Even if you're a little hung up on that, there's plenty here that can still help you
And
and
also,
make your
you
life
know,
work better.
and Katie, think about it this way. Whether or not there's reincarnation is really not the question. The question is, am I living my life as if I understand there's a purpose to it,
Mhm.
and that I am trying to learn something and accomplish something, and I'm trying to be loving and more compassionate? And if I go at it with those questions and I cross over at the end and I find out there is reincarnation or there isn't, it's irrelevant. Reincarnation and all of those dogma stories are really taught to people a lot of the times to get them to behave. But if we're just following our hearts and living our best life, then it really doesn't matter what we believe. If we can see God in each other and find love in the moments of great pain, then we're enlightened. We're getting the knowledge here and the wisdom that we came to achieve.
That's what it's really about. Yeah. Now, I also want to say in your book, in addition to the story about your vision, your out of body experience, you have also talked about something other types of mystical experiences like that. And one of the ones that you mention is one that I think a lot of people haven't heard of, or at least haven't heard a lot about. So we know about near death experiences, but you have had something called a shared death experience more than once.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard that, I thought, ooh, that's kind of scary. Like, I don't know if that's a good thing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well,
What that was like for you?
yeah, Raymond Moody coined the term near-death experience, but people don't know he also coined the term shared death experience, and he started teaching about that long ago. It just didn't gain all the attention that near-death experiences did, but they are just as profound, and there's been a lot of research in the last decade about them. And the way they're described as someone who either has a loved one, can be in another city, another state, or they could be at the bedside of this person when they're crossing. Then they find themselves being lifted into an altered state of consciousness with their loved one when their loved one crosses. And I'll tell you how that worked for Paul. It was different for Paul and Chrissy and Dad. Each one of them came with different shared death experiences, but all of them quite vivid and with
And Chrissy
very strong.
was your best friend, right?
Chrissy was my best girlfriend. So, let me tell you that one. That's the most fun. She and I had grown up in Catholic school together, always laughing and being in church, giggling and trying not to get kicked out by the nuns. We had so much fun. She was so brilliant. And so the way my signature experience with Chrissy was always laughing so hard that my stomach muscles hurt, and even peeing in my pants. I can say that now, but I was very embarrassed about it when I was growing up with her. But she would make me laugh so hard that I would be like, Chrissy, you've got to stop. You're killing me here, and, and so that was our friendship. And when Paul died, she had gone to Georgetown University and I was living in Colorado. And so in our 20s, we would travel to see each other. And she came to see me after Paul died and we went skiing. It was only July, it was November. So it was just a few months after Paul had crossed. And she came to see me. We went skiing. She was so helpful in processing things, talking about the meaning of life and what was I going to do now. And she fell while we were skiing and she got this terrible bruise on her leg. And we were both looking at it going, my gosh, did you break something? But she was like, no, I can walk on it. It doesn't hurt. And we took her to the airport and she flew to California where she lived. And by the time she got off of the plane, they took her to the ER and there were bruises all over her body. And she was diagnosed with extreme aggressive leukemia and given a very short time to live. And that was really my dark night of the soul, because I had let go of Paul and I was, Chrissy was my life partner of processing things that happened. And now she was going to suffer and die. It was just such a bottom moment for me. And so she went through a lot of suffering. She went through a bone marrow transplant. We thought it had been successful. And so a few more months went by and we thought she was in remission. and I was down in Mexico because I was so broken at that point. I had gone to Mexico to teach fitness at a resort. It was the early 80s. You can laugh at me, but I had the headband and Madonna music, and we taught aerobics at Los Aeróbicos de Mazatlan. It was very fun.
Did you have leg warmers?
As you do when the two people you love the most in the world die or are suffering and you just don't know what to do with life. You go teach fitness at a resort in the 80s, you know? And so in the middle of the night, one night, Chrissy was with me the whole night, making me laugh so hard that my stomach muscles were hurting. I would even wake up in the night going, oh my God, I'm with Chrissy. I can feel her with me. She's showing me things and taking me places. And I would fall back to sleep and I'd be laughing with her. She was so happy. And I woke up and went, I was with Chrissy all night. Oh my God, I was with Chrissy all night. And I got a phone call through to her mother. And her mother said, yes, Chrissy went into a coma and died in her sleep last night. And I knew that Chrissy had come to me immediately to show me, number one, there is no death, and that she was happy and free, and laughter and joy was the dominant emotion in the divine realms, and there was no suffering, and that she could fly me around. She was always very social in physical life. So in spirit life, she was flying me around to see our friends. Just the greatest message of love and laughter and freedom from suffering. And I was ecstatic at the same time that I was kind of grieving. I was walking in both of those worlds with her because I knew she was in the most amazing, happy state of consciousness, free of the body. And I also missed her terribly. And that's the story of grief, that we walk in both of those worlds at the same time. So she brought me into that altered state. Paul brought me into an altered state where I stayed in it for a month. And it affected me that something would happen and I would hear, what is the divine order of this? And I was suddenly seeing life as if I was in the divine realms and seeing it all from a different paradigm of divine order. And I couldn't eat. I lost a whole lot of weight because my body kind of couldn't be back on the earth yet. And it was about a month before I remember a friend came to see me and brought me Doritos and grapes. And she said, I'm not leaving here until we eat this whole bag of Doritos and all of these grapes. And that started me on the diet of Doritos and grapes that brought me back into my body and back down from the shared death experience. So they're just phenomenal, in my opinion. They are our loved ones saying, come with me, come and see what I see, come and be with me. And then the only bad part is we have to come back down here because it's not our exit point yet. But there's always Doritos and grapes.
That's your secret weapon for coming back. If the world's coming to an end, we need Doritos and grapes.
If I die first, girl, you are not going to get any sleep for a long time. We're going to remember how we wanted to go to Greece and do all these things. Well, we're going to do it.
We're going to do it. So every day you walk clients through this material and through what they're going through. And I know that you've led them on all kinds of journeys where they have met their guides and talked to their guides and gotten information and advice and teachings that have really helped turn their lives around. Can you share some of those stories with us?
Oh, yeah. I am so blessed to do this because when I take a client, first we do the numerology and then I put them in a relaxation state and then say, okay, now we're going into the divine, and I guide them. And then I'll say, now you're going to drop into a past lifetime that's significant for your current life. And they drop in and then I'll say, so tell me what you're experiencing. And they'll start reporting back to me. It's extraordinary, Katie, because I get to witness someone traveling out of their logic mind, going into another world, seeing it vividly with detail, recognizing other people that they know in this current life, but yet totally knowing what they're wearing, what everything looks like, what their soul lesson is. And these are people who may not even totally believe in this before we do it. My client today she wanted part of a soul regression where we just went to the divine realm so she could meet with her guide and her departed husband. She wasn't ready for the past lifetime part. But even that, she was being with him and talking to him. She could feel him. And she said she could feel his hair as his head was against her. And so they are in that realm. And they come back with a knowingness that, yes, life is eternal, that our loved ones never leave us, and that there is a purpose to all of this. And I don't have to tell them that. That's what they're experiencing and hearing and learning. And it's extraordinary. I am so blessed. I can be having a terrible day, and I get to take a client on a trip like that, and I'm elated at the end of it because I'm going with them.
And I love that they're bringing back the same messages. This is very confirming. No one's coming back and saying, well, I was a little angry over there, or someone was mad at me.
And that's the thing, they'll report back about they might have had a father who was abusive while he was here. But when they meet him in the divine realms, it's like, wow, I wish I'd known him like that. Katie, are you going to die now? Because if you're going to die, I'm going with you on that shared death experience.
No. I'm staying right here.
Okay. They get to see even people who were not living up to their potential when they were here. When they meet him in the divine, they see him as their highest and best self, and it surprises them. Like this client said, gosh, I wish my father had been that way when he was here, but he apologized profusely and gave her so much love and encouragement when she met him in the divine. And he was very aware of all the ways that he had hurt her. Well, I guess we need to go so you can not die on me here.
Well, tell us where we can find your book.
My book is available on Amazon, but people can just go to my website, suefrederick.com, and they can find my books, my classes, my sessions, all of that there. And I'm always teaching another class. I'll have another class posted next week. And the classes are very reasonably priced, and they're on Zoom, so people can jump in. I'll be speaking at the International Association of Near-Death Studies Conference in Washington, D.C., the first weekend of September. That's going to be a very fun conference with a lot of people sharing their near-death experiences, their shared death experiences, and all these things we're talking about. Let's see what else.
You have something coming up in August, don't you?
Well, that's it. That's the IANS conference, International Association of Near-Death something conference.
and I want to, whoops, there we go. I want to make sure people see
through a divine lens. So please get this book on Amazon. I'd be so grateful. I'd really, really appreciate it. And if you like the book, please write a review on Amazon. And if you're really into numerology, or you're fascinated and want to be into it, you have to get my workbook. It's called Sacred Numerology by Sue Frederick, and it's on Amazon as well. And those two books together, they give you the whole picture of how to lift up into the divine lens and use numerology to help you look at your life from your soul's wisdom.
And your numerology workbook walks you through every step. So even if you're like me and you're not much of a numbers person, don't get intimidated, because
I made it very user-friendly, very simple.
You did.
For people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you, Katie. Love you so much. And this has been so fun. And to all of our listeners, thank you. Thank you. And until we all meet again, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Katie.
Bye-bye.